Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming out for tonight's special meeting of the Committee of Adjustment of the Town of Pelham. This hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham is a meeting being reconvened to consider the development applications relating to 20 Allen Crescent. All submissions and comments submitted at the initial hearing form part of the record on these files and will be considered in the committee's deliberations. The purpose of this continued meeting is to consider new information relating to the application and for the committee to render a decision. Everyone present will be given an opportunity to comment on the applications being heard. Please contain your comments to the new information only and address your comments and questions through the chair. If you have previously spoken, your comments are still valid and there is no need to repeat your submission. Copies of decisions will be mailed to the applicant or agent and to any other person who files a written request. There are colored forms for this purpose on the back corner of the table, which are available on the back table. If you have submitted a form at the last meeting, we still have your information and you will receive the decisions. Any person, corporation, or public body has the right to appeal either the decision itself or the conditions of consent to the local appeal body within 20 days of the decision for minor variances and with 20 days of the mailing of the decision for the consent applications. The panel tonight consists of, on my far left, Mr. Bernie Law, my immediate left, Mr. Bill Sheldon. To my immediate right is Holly Wilford, who works in our clerk's department and is acting as our secretary for tonight's meeting. At the post in front of us is Mrs. Nancy Bizzato. She is the clerk of the Town of Pelham and also secretary-treasurer of the Committee of Adjustment for the Town of Pelham. Furthest down on the line is Mr. Derek Young, who is from our engineering department. Next to him is Mr. Curtis Thompson, who I'm surprised to actually see because I understand he's just got back from a vacation. And of course, closest to me at the pound is Mrs. Barb Weens, who is the director of planning. The file number, first of all, the chairman is going to use his discretion once again. And, hold on a second. We've done the call to order. Are there any members have an interest, a pecuniary interest in the general nature with the applications being heard tonight?
I do not.
I have none.
Neither do I, Madam Secretary. We have not heard of any requests for withdrawal of the applications being considered, have we?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, we have not.
In that case, I would like the committee to consider kind of amending the agenda. We were originally going to start with the variances, A28 and A29. I would rather we proceed initially with application B11-219, which is the conveyance application on the property at 20 Allen Crescent. Can I have a mover for the amending the agenda?
So moved.
Mr. Bill Sheldon? Mr. Bernie Law seconds. All in favor of advancing the agenda? In that case, we will start with consent application B11, 2019P, regarding the conveyance at 20 Allen Crescent, Lot 18, Plan 271 in the town of Pelham. Ms. Wilford.
Committee of Adjustment hearing, Tuesday, February 25th, 2020. Committee of Adjustment hearing. Please note, no decisions have been made prior to this public meeting. This presentation is based upon the Town of Pelham's Planning Department report and analysis. All comments received from commenting agencies and the public have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members for their consideration. Decorum. The Committee of Adjustment is a formal public hearing requiring decorum, meaning all comments are to be made through the chair. Please wait to speak at the public portion of the meeting and only speak while at the podium. Disrespectful comments will not be tolerated, including comments about staff, the applicant, etc. Cheering, booing, or hissing from the gallery will not be tolerated. Please note, if decorum is lost, the meeting may be recessed and persons will be asked to leave. Please note, at the Committee of Adjustment hearing on January 14, 2020, files A28 to A29 2019P and B11/2019P were considered for the subject lands known as 20 Allen Crescent. The committee deferred all files requesting additional information from town planning staff. The committee requested planning staff to provide more information on defining what neighborhood the subject land is part of, and more information on Pelham's official plan policy B1.1.3. Please note, the original town recommendation report dated January 14, 2020 still applies in its entirety and continues to represent planning staff's professional opinion. All comments and written submissions continue to form part of the record and need not to be restated. Additional public comments have been received by Deborah and Keith Powell, Ted and Angelina Galata, Jim Morando, Tony and Yolanda Bostock, Jan Chamber. Please note, these comments and all others received regarding process have been forwarded in full to the Committee of Adjustment members and planning staff. Planning report addendum to recommendation report. New information as requested by the committee to be read in full for the record. The addendum is dated February 25th, 2020. At the Committee of Adjustment meeting held on the 14th of January 2020, the above noted development applications were considered for the subject lands known as 20 Allen Crescent. After a lengthy public hearing, the committee deferred the applications sine requesting additional information by town planning to include defining what neighborhood the subject land is part of, and more information on Pelham Official Plan Policy B1.1.3. The original town recommendation report dated January 14, 2020 still applies in its entirety and continues to represent planning staff's professional opinion. Previously, there was confusion amongst the committee members as to why the minor variance applications were not considered prior to the severance application. The reason the applications must be considered either concurrently or in the alternative specific order with the consent decision preceding the variance is because the variance are zoning requests associated with the proposed reconfigured lots. Simply, the committee cannot approve site-specific variances on parcels which do not exist. There were also confusion amongst the committee members regarding whether or not the lands in the East Vaughan Hill secondary plan area would contribute towards the annual 15% residential intensification target. Firstly, the following provincial policy statement, growth plan, Niagara Region official plan, and Pelham official plan definitions may prove helpful before continuing further. Redevelopment means the creation of new lots, uses, or lots on previously developed land in existing communities, including brownfield sites. Residential intensification means intensification of a property, site, or area which results in a net increase in residential units or accommodations and includes A. Redevelopment, including the redevelopment of brownfield sites. B. The development of vacant or underutilized lots within previously developed areas. C. Infill development. D. The conversion or expansion of existing industrial, commercial, and institutional buildings for residential use. And E. The conversion or expansion of existing residential buildings to create new residential units or accommodations, including accessory apartments, secondary suites, and rooming houses. Delineated built boundary. The limits of the developed urban area as defined by the minister in consultation with affected municipalities for the purpose of measuring the minimum intensification target in this plan. Designated greenfield area. Lands within settlement areas, not including rural settlements, but outside of the delineated built-up areas that have been designated in an official plan for development and are required to accommodate forecasted growth to the horizon of this plan. Designated greenfield areas do not include excess lands. The majority of the East Fawn Hill Secondary Plan area is a designated greenfield area, as opposed to a designated built-up area, which is illustrated in both the Niagara Region Official Plan and Pelham Official Plan. Any net increase of dwelling units within the delineated built-up area would contribute towards the minimum annual 15% target and consequently the 300 total dwelling units. What is the neighborhood? In the province of Ontario, there is no land use planning definition for what constitutes a neighborhood. No definition exists at the regional or local municipal level either. Researchers and academics have not agreed on any exact definition nationally or internationally. Neighborhoods are usually spaces defined as a precise geographical area. However, this varies widely depending on jurisdiction. Many also consider the concept of a neighborhood as a functional set of social networks or an area with considerable and consistent face-to-face interaction. From an urban design perspective, a neighborhood is often described as the area that can be walked within 5 or 10 minutes threshold. Consequently, a neighborhood is a challenge to define as it is used to describe spatial, social, and complex human networks. Ultimately, neighborhoods mean different things to different people. If we consider that official plan policy B1.1.3c references how a zoning application could increase the unit density up by 25% of the existing gross density of land within 300 meters of the site, the committee could interpret the neighborhood at a 300-meter linear distance based on this specific policy. Planning staff caution this rudimentary neighborhood measuring metric in lieu of another acceptable definition, as its real-world application is rather arbitrary. A 300-meter radius around the subject land ignores the horizontal confinements of the linear street network and true geographic context. Similarly, a 300-meter linear distance in all directions can simply ignore the daily social interactions of some residents. For example, some neighbors may logically consider a street beyond 300 meters in one direction to be part of their own neighborhood. However, in the opposite direction, it may be considerably less than 300 linear meters. With regards to the official plan policy B1.13, I will read the new font in red. The downtown Fonthill core is approximately 600 linear meters from the subject lands, where the larger neighborhood shopping plazas and 3 public elementary schools are less than a kilometer away. This is the comfortable walking distance for the average person. If the committee resonates with the 300-meter linear distance as a neighborhood-defining metric, as in the subsequent policy, please note that the original cited neighborhood density examples above were already taken into the spatial range. The committee should be aware that if a zoning bylaw amendment application is pursued, the prospect for a more intense or an alternative building type, i.e. multi-units, could be invited. The proposed frontage and area of severed lots is indeed smaller than the default R1 zone. Neighborhoods with a range of lot sizes is not inherently of a negative quality. It provides for a variety of choice, which is considered to be a benefit. Compatibility with the established character does not mean the same, but rather means coexisting in harmony, and the change is not so significant to create an adverse impact. By their very nature, neighborhoods evolve and change all the time, and it is important that they do so to maintain validity and to be sustainable. If neighborhoods and communities did not evolve and change, they become stagnant and can lead to a decline. Again, the question is the degree of change so significant to be adverse? It is planning staff's opinion that in this case, the degree of change by the creation of one residential lot for single detached residential use and the associated minor variance will not result in an adverse impact on the character of the street or neighborhood, and therefore the change is compatible and the new dwelling can coexist in harmony in the context of the existing neighborhood. At the hearing on January 14th, 2020, the committee did ponder whether or not a rezoning was warranted. As mentioned above, zoning bylaw amendments are allowed to request changes in the list of permitted uses, whereas minor variance applications are generally restricted to amending the numeric provisions. The official plan recognizes that additional housing growth via residential intensification, especially in walkable neighborhoods, is an opportunity and a way to achieve other important goals such as helping support the local businesses and public service facilities, providing a diverse housing supply, sustainable demographics, maintaining existing infrastructure, and neighborhood vitality. The objective from a land use planning perspective and as is articulated in the town's official plan are to encourage the diversity of housing in an effort to accommodate a range of income levels, encourage intensification and redevelopment within the urban area, respect the character of existing development, and ensure applications are physically compatible with the character of the surrounding neighborhood, to maintain and enhance the character stability of the existing and well-established neighborhoods by ensuring development and redevelopment is compatible with the scale and density of the existing development, and to encourage the development of neighborhoods which are compact, pedestrian-friendly, and provide a mix of housing types, community facilities, small-scale commercial centers, and open public spaces. The proposed consent and minor variance applications contribute to fulfilling these goals, and provide for one additional lot in an established neighborhood results in development that at its scale is appropriate and compatible with the existing neighborhood, provides a degree of choice, contributes to the development of a compact neighborhood, and to the stability of the neighborhood is enhanced by the investment in the neighborhood. Planning staff's original recommendations for all three development applications remain unchanged.
Thank you, Ms. Wilford. Gentlemen, do you have any comments you wish to make regarding the summary of the report?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, if you would like, I can read the recommended consents, conditions into the record.
Certainly.
I just needed a quick drink.
Certainly.
Application file B11/2019 P20 Allen Crescent. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals, dealing with appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. In planning staff opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that consent file known as B11/2019 P be granted subject to the following conditions: that the applicant obtain final approval of necessary minor variance or zoning amendments, conduct an archaeological assessment and receive clearance from the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport, ensure the new lot is serviced with an individual 20mm water service and 125mm sanitary sewer lateral in accordance with the town standards. Installation of any service will require a temporary works permits to be obtained and approved by Public Works Department. If existing services are proposed for reconnection, such services shall be inspected by the Public Works Department to determine their condition is satisfactory prior to connection. The applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works. Submit a drawing indicating the location of individual water services and sanitary laterals for all lots to confirm no existing service breaches from or through any proposed lot lines to other lands and from or through the remnant parcel to other lands. Locate cards for all lots shall be required after the installment of new services. Submit a comprehensive overall lot grading and drainage plan for all parcels demonstrating that the drainage neither relies upon nor negatively impacts neighboring properties to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works. To obtain approval for a driveway entrance culvert permit for the new lot issued through the Public Works Department to town standards, the applicant shall bear all costs associated with these works, reinstate part of the westerly curb of the existing driveway apron of Part 2 to the satisfaction of the Director of Public Works, plant 2 large caliper trees from the town's approved street tree planting schedule along Part 1 frontage, one on each side of the new driveway, and to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development, obtain and close a demolition permit for the removal of the attached canopy and shed to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development, sign the Town of Pelham Standard Memorandum of Understanding explaining the development charges and cash in lieu of the dedication of land for park purposes are required prior to the issuing of building permit. Provide the Secretary Treasurer with a registrable legal description of the subject parcel together with a copy of the deposited reference plan, if applicable, for the use in the issuance of the certificate of consent. Provide the final certification fee of $395 payable to the Treasurer, Town of Pelham, be submitted to the Secretary Treasurer. All costs associated with fulfilling conditions of consent shall be borne by the applicant. For application file A28/2019P, 20 Allen Crescent, Part 1, planning staff is of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals dealing with the appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. In planning staff's opinion, the application is considered a gentle form of residential intensification, is consistent with the provincial policy statement, and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend the application number A28/2019P be granted as follow and subject to the following conditions. That the applicant, at the time of building permit, provide building elevation plans that positively reflect the neighborhood character through the use of compatibly pitched roofs, windows, doors symmetrically apportioned to the building's mass, and the concurrent use of exterior cladding to the satisfaction of the Director of Community Planning and Development, and that the approval of the minor variance is subject to the consent file B11/2019P being approved. File A29/2019P, 20 Allen Crescent, Part 2. Planning staff is of the opinion that the proposal applies current planning and development goals dealing with appropriate infill development, making more efficient use of the existing urban lands where suitable to do so. In planning staff's opinion, the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to provincial, regional, and local plans. Planning staff recommend that application number A29/2019P be granted. The above decision is suggested to have the following conditions: that the approval of the minor variance is subject to consent file B11/2019P be approved. And that is it for me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Gentlemen, do you have anything to add to the comments, or do you agree with the planning report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again for reference, I'm Craig Rowe with Upper Canada Consultants, representing the property owner. We are in agreement with the additional information provided by staff and those recommendations. Maybe just a point of clarity that Mr. Young could provide, it noted a 20 millimeter water connection. I believe that would be 200, correct? Just for the conditions to make sure it's right.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a 20 millimeter water service?
In the conditions, it said 20 millimeter.
Yeah, minimum is acceptable, yes.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. From a planning perspective, I don't have any formal additional comments to provide tonight. Certainly available to answer any questions of the committee members or provide clarity on any matters. With me this evening is Mr. Patrick Maloney, who's legal counsel for the owner of the property, and he just has a couple of remarks before we begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Patrick Maloney. I'm a partner with the law firm of Sullivan Manny in St. Catharines. I am going to address all three applications at one time. I get what you did with your motion, but because my comments are relatively general, they do apply to all three applications. I don't intend to get into the various planning comments that the committee has received. You received two reports from the town's planning staff, planning justification report from Mr. Rowe. You've heard the opinion of Mr. Rowe, you've heard the opinion of Mr. Thompson and Ms. Weens, and you've also heard the opinion of the residents. The committee did defer the consideration of these applications to address two aspects. Mr. Thompson did provide an addendum to the original planning report that addressed those two questions, and we do agree with that position. I did briefly want to get into the legal aspect of this. In your capacity as members of the Committee of Adjustment, you are required to make decisions based on the planning merits of the applications and not necessarily concede to the will of any opinion. In particular, the Planning Act says that the Committee of Adjustment or a decision of the Committee of Adjustment shall be consistent with and conform with the provincial plan in effect, which is effectively the growth plan in this case. At this point, the only expert evidence that you've heard, whether it's tonight or in January, were the qualified planning opinions from essentially three land use planners, the two planners from the town and Mr. Rowe. And those opinions were that the applications are consistent with the PPS and do conform with the growth plan. Their opinions also address the consent and the minor variances and the tests under the Planning Act. And in their opinions, is the applications should be approved pursuant to that. Now, I do, and I completely understand the concerns of the residents. Here you have a consent application in an established residential neighborhood. However, the province of Ontario has prescribed a set of policies in both the PPS and the growth plan that support the type of infill and intensification that is suggested in this application or proposed in this matter. The applicant has proposed a development application that is consistent with and conformity with these policies. He has chosen to prepare or complete a severance of the property. He could have sought a higher density development, but in speaking with Mr. Mancini, he indicated that it was his decision that the more compatible type of development would have been a single detached dwelling, and that's what he's applied for. And that is the policies upon which he has conformed with in the planning report or opinion that you've received from both the consulting planning and the town's planning report. So it is these same policies that you, as a decision maker and a member of the Committee of Adjustment, must follow when you make your decision. So to sort of summarize, we're asking that you approve all three applications you have before us based on the conditions that were recommended, and we have no problem with any of the conditions imposed against the consent and against the minor variance. I recognize that there was some discussion in the last occasion and some opinion that a zoning amendment might be more appropriate. In that regard, we feel that you should approve the variances as applied for as minor variances, and that a zoning amendment is not necessary. However, if you feel that a zoning amendment is necessary, you can approve the consent before you today and make it subject to a condition of zoning. That's not the ideal way of dealing with it, but it is another method of addressing this. We do feel that you should approve the variances as applied for and that a zoning amendment is not necessary. So subject to any questions, I'm sure you will have. Those are all my submissions along with Mr. Rowe.
Thank you, Mr. Rowe and Mr. Maloney. And now I guess we'll open the floor up to comments from people in front of us. I would like your comments basically to address new matters that are being brought up tonight. Please don't bring up things we brought up in the previous meeting. Is anyone willing to speak? Please come up to the podium, state your name and address, and please direct your questions and comments to the chair, and I will request members of staff and the developer's consultant to respond in due course. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Please come up to the podium.
Thank you. My name is Jim Mirando. I reside on Highland Avenue, 5 Highland, and that's in the neighborhood. At the, and I hope I don't overstep my bounds, we've heard all of this recent information that's been brought forward, and it's all anchored to policy, provincial, regional, and whatnot. I just want to talk about the bylaws in this town. At the last meeting, Mr. Curtis mentioned he located and measured one lot on Highland Avenue that was in comparable size to the newly created lot. That house was built over 30 years ago and has been occupied by the current owner-occupant for over 30 years. Not by an absentee landlord, but tenants of dubious character. This house is in full compliance with the R2 zone. Part of Highland Avenue is zoned R2, part of it is zoned R1. So this one comparable lot is zoned R2, and there are no, what's the best word for this? Nothing bad about it. It complies to all of the zoning bylaws. Zoning bylaws, like all laws, are very important because they try and promote the greater good and they protect people. In this case, they establish the bare minimum standards for all relevant setbacks, lot coverages, total size of the property, its uses, etc. These zoning bylaws protect all the citizens in our town, not just our neighborhood. The zoning bylaw cannot and must not be compromised, and the new properties being proposed must be in accordance of our zoning bylaws. I think it's incumbent upon us, everyone here, to acknowledge that we must enforce the town's valid zoning bylaw when it deals with intensification. The next item I'd like to mention is the inside setback on the existing property. In other words, adjacent to the proposed new lot line. Okay? The existing, pardon me, let me catch myself. The minimum standard for Zone 1 is 1.8 meters, and they are proposing 1.2 meters. Again, that 1.8 meters is a minimum standard. That's the minimum, the bare minimum of the bylaw. If the severance is granted, it would create a violation to the zoning bylaw because the house is already there, and you put the lot line, this proposed lot line, 1.2 meters away, you're creating something that is, oh dear, is in violation of the zoning bylaw. So what does that do? You can't move the house, and given that fact, you can then safely conclude that granting this severance would show a disregard for the zoning bylaw. and show a bias toward granting the other 3 identical variances that will follow. With all respect to all here, let's just enforce the zoning bylaw. Rezone to a lot, rezone to a lot that is fully legal and compliant. In doing this, it will come before an elected town council for approval, who, by the way, were asked not to attend this meeting tonight. Anyways, there is a process available, not a shortcut, not to be approved or denied, it is to be approved or denied by our duly elected responsible officials, our councilors. Look around. There are a lot of people here, homeowners who are objecting. 44 more signatures, gentlemen, of people from the neighborhood. 22 last, 44 additional from the neighborhood who are not fond of this proposal. In fact, they object to it. Why do they object to it? Because there are serious concerns about the property values being affected negatively. Houses in backyards. Every backyard should have a house. How does this enhance our neighborhood? Anybody? It doesn't. There are 5 more situations very similar to this. In fact, a couple of them are better than this, within 300 feet of my front door. Maybe someone should consider a limit on intensification in a small little neighborhood. Intensification, for the most part, does not enhance, but downgrades neighborhoods. It's concentration and desecration. Without proper zoning under a valid zoning bylaw, that's what's going to happen. The minimum standards will be compromised and reduced, not to the benefit of the neighborhood. There is good intensification and there is bad intensification. I urge this committee to do the right thing. I urge them to render no decision and defer to the zoning bylaw. Not only in this case, but in every future intensification, desecration, and concentration proposal. People before profit. Thank you very much. Who can I give these 44 signatures to?
The clerk will take them.
Thank you, Mr. Miranda.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Bizzetto, we'll take those. Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak on the matter? Yes, please come up to the podium, state your name and address for the record.
I saw you put this down. It's shorter now than it was before. Okay, we're good. Some of my comments cross over between variance and severance. Oh, sorry, let's do that first. Ted Galata, 5 Allen Crescent. We good? Okay. Several comments. One is regarding water. We discussed that last meeting, but after that, I got thinking about this, and there is sections of the provincial policy statement that have reference to situations like ours. And a quote that being, it's in a built-up area where the need of storm... Okay.
Please respect the gentleman on the podium. Apologies, Mr. Chair.
It's in a built-up area where the need of stormwater controls, that was done before the need for stormwater controls, and it already experiences stormwater management problems. Now, although Elizabeth is served by storm drains, the only ones that serve Allen are at the bottom of the street in front of 6 Elizabeth and across at the street from it at 8 Elizabeth. Now, we all know that the lots at Allen and Elizabeth were built large to absorb the drain and septic beds of the years ago. However, our larger lots with the sandy soil also serve the purpose of absorbing and draining most of the runoff from the roof water and snowmelt. Having said this, we still have problems with our storm runoff. And ignoring this and building more homes would result in more hard surfaces that would push more water, carrying leaves, road sand, and debris down to the street. And at the same time, I submitted with those photographs. Now, the first it started out is 19 Allen. I knew the people that used to live there prior to this, and they had to put a grate up in front of their garage. Water was running down from the street into their garage. So the grate takes the water in and around back, and it's still staying within their property, but it empties into their backyard. So having thought that, I went back to the current owner, Mrs. Smith, and she said, I asked her to tell me more about it. And she says, well, yes, she still has that problem, and not only that, she also had to do remedial work and to raise her garage floor because of that same issue. And if you note, 19 Allen, in the photographs that I had provided, are directly across the street from 20 Allen. And 20 Allen is at a higher elevation than 19. And example B in the photograph that I provided, it's one of the 2 storm drains. Now, these pictures were taken in January. And it's in front of 6 Elizabeth. And the homeowner at 6 Elizabeth has had repeated problems here with this drain. And in a heavy runoff, rain with leaves and road and sand blocked that drain regularly. And once it's blocked, additional rainwater and more debris onto the driveway, and it goes up onto his grass. So that's B. Now, number C, I was listening to, I believe it was Mr. Law. He went on quite a bit about the problems on Elizabeth when you lived there when you were younger. And then when I went home, it was one of these eureka moments. And I remembered back when I went down Elizabeth last summer, and they were putting in a speed bump in the Victory Gardens subdivision area. So that was 1 week. And a week later, I went back, and they were closing off the speed bump at the ends with cement. So then I thought, this is not a speed bump, okay? This is for water diversion. And so again, like Mrs. Smith, I went down to the Victory Gardens and I asked a resident. And I said, okay, tell me more about this speed bump. And he says, well, it's 100% for the purpose of diverting water. And then, and again, I provided photographs for that as well. So this goes on and just says that, yes, we have a problem in this area, and any other development is going to make it worse. Now, since I talked to these people, I also wanted to have their name available and their phone number, because in case you, as a committee, wanted to contact them, gain more information. Now, that was my initial reason. But I had the second reason after thinking that, and this was submitted in January 20th, this was submitted to the town. second reason, and it's one that I wasn't surprised, but in effect I find it inexcusably inconsiderate that the town planners that want to promote this did not pick up the phone and say, Mrs. Smith, by the way, like I did, do you have a problem? Does this exist? Or like the people at Victory Gardens, no one from the town phoned. And they did not care. And they're not caring about the citizens that they're supposed to represent. Now, to continue on with the water and expand on my comments on storm sewer management and the Golden Horseshoe Growth Plan, they say that we are to incorporate green infrastructure. Now, Allen Crescent doesn't have these large ponds like the new developments have, but we do have the green infrastructure in the large lots that absorb the rainwater. And without it, the town, by building up more houses, they don't have any alternative or strategy to get around this, because these, again, were built at a time when there are no storm sewers there. I have a few more submissions. Now, this one also goes to variance. Can I continue with this? May I? Perfect. Now, and this one is on the topic of is the variance minor in nature? Now, the town planner says the proposed reduction in lot and lot frontage are minor in nature given the surrounding area, and the small lot sizes are increasingly becoming common throughout the town, region, and the province. Now, we shouldn't be comparing this to other areas. The new development coming in should be compared to what is there now, and since the planning department raised the issue of throughout the province, I did a review of other city official plans and how they treated intensification. And there was a common theme throughout. And if you sum it all up, it says it's to respect the character of the existing neighborhood, to protect the existing neighborhood is a fundamental concern, and new development is to be compatible with the existing in scale, density, size, and shape of the lot. And although the town planner and his report says it in the same way as they sort of superficially gloss over the water aspect, just because they say it does not necessarily make it true, and I do not think that this can be compatible with our neighborhood. Now, also under desirable for the development of the planning report refers to 20 Allen as underutilized open space. Now, in this, I gather Mr. Mirando and I were thinking the exact same thing, but separately, because I worded as, this is not underutilized open space, it's a backyard. And what the builder is attempting to do is build a house in a backyard. And if this is the aim for the planning department to view anything except the smallest of properties as underutilized open space, then every citizen in this town should be concerned and afraid the direction of this planning department is taking us. I'm sure many residents in our town would see this redevelopment of 20 Allen as not desirable for our community. Now, still staying with not minor, there are some legal precedents I sent to you, your way, and I won't talk much about them, but they do say that something can be not minor for two reasons. It could be not minor because it's too large or too important. Now, in this case, too large, I think the variances requested by 20 Allen should not be permitted for both of these reasons. The fact that it's too large because collectively the variances allow for another lot that would not be compatible in size to the others in the immediate area. It's too important because one severance leads to a precedent. A precedent leads to more redevelopment of such properties in this neighborhood and beyond. more severed properties lead to a change in the character of our community in a negative way. And such a concern is warranted, and that's evidenced by the large number of people that have come out on the 14th and are out today, and with the everybody that's submitted on their information. And they're strongly opposed to this. Not just the people that abut 20 Allen immediately, it's the people that live further away as well. They, still staying with, is it not minor in nature? Although I've submitted some of those previous cases, and some are court cases, some were, in this case, OMB cases over the years. The more recent ones I just didn't have access to, but that's only last few years, so I couldn't get anything. There's one, we'll call it Melling versus North York, and the issue as to appropriateness and whether requested variances are minor comes down in parts to the particular area to be considered. Variances to permit proposed lots which fall below the range of the lot sizes and frontages prevailing in the area are not minor. If I may continue, another subject if I can. Okay. Fonthill Lumber. During the last meeting, several people expressed vocal concern and surprise when Ms. Weens mentioned that Fonthill Lumber is not considered in intensification because it's industrial. Now, I contacted a representative of the Provincial Ministry of Housing and Municipal Affairs to get more clarity on the subject. When I phoned him, it was a conversation of, I explained Fonthill Lumber, but I didn't expect anything in depth from him. But it's just like, this is the issue. We got a lumber yard was built in 1951 on the outskirts of town. Town has now grown up, and now the whole story where now it has become redundant, and now it's being used for another purpose. Now, he said that on that topic, that a municipality, he speculated that a municipality might want to maintain its industrial status in order to keep it for future industrial purposes as an area for potential employment. However, as it's not used that way, as it now being used for residential, he said that would not be the case and couldn't offer any further explanation. He did say that it was up to the town to decide what is to be attributed as intensification, as well as what areas in nodes or corridors where they to exist. And the definition of intensification, we've done that here tonight, and nowhere does it indicate a past use. But it does talk about brownfield. So if a brownfield can be rehabilitated into something that could be used residentially, then certainly Fonthill Lumber can be resurrected like it is now and be used for intensification, then used for our target of how many? 300? Is how many over? Is it?
I believe we're looking at 300 units over the next
16
would be
years.
the 20-year planning period within the urban areas. Am I correct, Mrs. Weens, on that?
That should be about right. That was one of the ones where I read this to my wife, and she says, pare it down a bit. So I scratched that part out. So that was part. So 300, I recall. Now, according to the official town plan, there is intensification corridors. And the intensification corridors, they talk about downtown, Highway 20, Canberra, Pelham Street, Pelham Town Square, Station Street. And as such, that sort of, although they don't name Fonthill Lumber specifically, they do mention Pelham Street, Highway 20. They also mention it in another way, and they say that there are transition areas. Transition areas are those that are located adjacent to the downtown designation and are intended for the use of mixed residential and commercial uses within existing buildings or through redevelopment that is complementary to the downtown. So I can see that picture that as being exactly what's happening with the Fonthill Yards right now. So that's why I'm saying I think it is that should be added to our intensification quota. And although it was mentioned previously about the East Fonthill project, and it's something that I could even see that as being intensification, because you've got this town border on one side, you've got development on other two sides, and it just looks like a large intensification area. No one, since it was a tree farm, no one's going to come along and say, I'm going to make a cornfield back out of it. It's just not going to happen. So its primary purpose going forward should be residential. And so you're not taking away any potential farmland from something. It's not like avoiding urban sprawl. But that's up to the town to decide what they consider to be intensification is. Only a couple more. Okay, now, Mr. Morando said something about there should be a limit on intensification. Well, or someone should have thought that there should have been a limit on intensification. Well, yes, they did. And in the official town plan, it does say that there are areas that they want to intensify, and they're named specifically. They're named downtown, like I said, and Pelham Street. They name Canberra Road. But it also says this does not preclude any consideration for other sites in the urban living designation. But that's provided these sites they abut arterial roads. So we're talking about, say, like Canberra Road, or are located at most 100 meters from the intersection of an arterial road. And according to the official town plan, with that 100-meter limit, 20 Allen is outside of that 20-mile limit, outside of that 100-meter limit. It's greater than 150 meters. And that seems to be something that the town wants to either gloss over. But on one hand, you can't say we have to stick with the provincial policy, we have to stick with the official plan, and still go ahead and say, oh, by the way, we don't want to pay attention to this other part, the part that says, really, 20 Allen is in an area that shouldn't be intensified. There could have been a reason why. Maybe people that wrote it said, okay, well, the infrastructure may not be able to support it. Maybe it's old infrastructure, so we don't want to develop certain areas. Maybe they want to concentrate on those things that are close to a major street where it's easy to tie in. Something like that residential place that's right next to Keith's. It's right on the main street, or where Keith's used to be. So it also could be they don't want to disrupt the neighborhoods as they are. And that's what we're saying, is that we don't want our neighborhood disrupted. So otherwise, if you go with the way the planning department is looking at this, then anything that is in this town that is any size is up for grabs, and say, yes, we'll intensify it. Yes, we will carve it up. And that is not planning. That's unorganized, and it's haphazard. Like you'll have one here and you have another one there, whichever one, whenever it comes available, a developer will come along and say, I think we'll do it here. And the planning department says, okay, well, sure, why not? Let's gloss over the part where it's not it's not an area where it should be. This is one you haven't heard before. I submitted a lot of these to you, but you've heard it in a certain different form. Now, this is something that the address is not important, but the criteria is important. And you heard this criteria a couple of weeks ago. And this is regarding 6 Brucewood. Totally different situation here. But again, think of the criteria. And this is the criteria that our town planner used to justify Brucewood. Brucewood probably went through. Big house, I gather, and he wants to make something bigger. It's also in an enclave, like Mr. Sheldon said. It would be an enclave like Allen is on an enclave. Now, the justification, the town planner used that, is that this project will not negatively impact the character of that neighborhood. Whereas he's focusing on the neighborhood immediate, when he speaks of Allen, he's speaking of the larger neighborhood of the town, the province, the region. He also says that the deviation from the bylaw is marginal on Brucewood, considering the size of the subject land. Well, the deviation on Allen is not minor, it is major. He says that there's plenty of space for stormwater drainage. Now, he mentioned that multiple times in his report to you. Now, just like I've talked to you about the water issue, and although the planner wants to gloss over it, there are problems with drainage on Allen Crescent. He went into a more of a personal aspect. The neighbors were not unduly affected. The neighbors around us feel that they would be unduly affected by this project. He also says that on Brucewood, there's privacy buffers that remain. Well, yeah, there's privacy buffers. The privacy buffers on Allen are being taken away. So it's quite the opposite. The design is compatible with the neighborhood. Well, I don't see the design as being able to be compatible in our area. And with Brucewood, he says there's still open space for recreation in those yards. And I don't see that in this proposed area, especially when he's referring to 20 Allen as underutilized open space. So, we've got the conclusion here. However, I do want to take a little bit of a sidestep here. And because it was brought up, I wasn't going to mention earlier we don't have a walkable community. It probably never necessarily was because of the hills. But I don't like the fact that the town planning department is putting the walkability argument forth. There are people that move onto Allen Crescent, and I've talked to them about it, and I say, they're new to the neighborhood, and I'll tell them that you're close to downtown, and the reality is you can walk downtown if you like, but most likely what's going to happen is you're going to go just like everybody else. You're going to get in your car, you're going to make those multiple trips. You're going to go to the bank, the grocery store, or the hardware store, but it's in your car. So we don't necessarily walk to the hardware store and back. It's not, and if you have a walkable community, you have to have something to walk to. And in my experience, the only walkable part is that if you go to Sobeys and you walk over to the liquor store, you've got your car parked there and you walk back and forth, and that's about it. And so when they say, yes, you can walk down to some place, you have to have something to walk to. And there are places that I have experienced. And the ones that fit the bill most effectively were I had go to visit our aunt on occasion. And it's my wife's aunt, and she lives in England, small town. And they have a better concept of this. And what the usual visualization is the shops are smaller, therefore they're closer together. They might have a parking lot behind the main street so that you go and park in that parking lot and you can walk to these small stores. And the only thing close to it now here in this area would be Niagara-on-the-Lake. And it's that idea, parking lot behind, you walk along the street. But Niagara-on-the-Lake probably couldn't exist either if it wasn't for the tourist aspect of it. And so I can understand that. I don't blame the planning department for not having a walkable community. It's part our fault too. We want the large Sobeys or well, actually, maybe I shouldn't be targeting Sobeys too much around here, but the large box stores. But that's just the way it is here. But I don't like the fact that they want to use that as an argument. So, in conclusion, okay. Many have given their opinion on this development, and I've tried to convey on the January 14th how Allen Crescent and Elizabeth Drive, it's a successful neighborhood in its present form. It's a street that has homes for people of all ages, but while the city planner refers to 20 Allen as, again, underutilized open space. On the 14th, I previously explained the environmental, economic, and social factors that must be considered according to the provincial policy statement. And at that meeting, Ms. Weens admitted that they did not look into social factors. And in response, after I brought up social factors, it's sort of like she was sort of squirming and trying to find a socialization